Well, welcome everyone to a very special episode of Heilman and Haver. We're very pleased to be joined today by a special guest, Jack McLeod. Jack is in his third decade as a working theatrical manager. He was born and raised in the Boston area. He toured the U.S. for 15 years as a stage manager, including 7 Broadway productions, and has worked internationally for 5 years, touring Asia, Europe, South America, Mexico, and Canada. Quite a resume.
He's probably worked on your favorite show and almost every great show you've ever heard of. And you can learn all about his escapades at jackmcleod.com. That's jack-mcleod.com. And we'll link that in the show notes. He joins us from Seattle, where he's currently working as production stage manager for the national tour of the world's most popular musical, Les Mis, currently on stage at the Fifth Avenue. Welcome to the show, Jack.
Welcome.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
So currently, as I said, you're in town working with Les Mis. First question is, how did you get aligned with this production specifically? And I know there's been numerous iterations of this tour that have come through. Have you been there all along? Have you jumped in at a certain point?
No, I started as a fan of the show back in the '80s, as we all did. I had the double album and all. And I had really no association with it until the redesign of the show, when the turntable went away and they reconceived the show with different directors than the original production, with James and Lawrence. That had a very successful launch, and followed by a successful tour, followed by a revival on Broadway. When it was going to go out on tour again following Broadway, that's when I joined. So I've been with it since then, and plan to be with it right until the end.
Well, the immensity of managing a show like Les Mis, it seems pretty unfathomable to the fan, to the layperson. What skill set do you find most valuable, or maybe what skill set do you call on most frequently when it comes to managing a show of that kind of magnitude?
Well, we're a company of 101 in our touring unit. So that includes the casts, the children, the teachers, the orchestra, the crew, the support systems, the management. So it's really about being a strong north. I'm the strong north. So I lead by example. I lead by kindness. I lead by listening. There's a multitude of things going on any particular day. So being open and being able to listen and deal with things, multitasking on a regular basis. So I think it's my humanity. I think that's what sort of sets me aside, is that I do lead by example. I built my career that way. That I think that's the best thing to do, especially on a show like this.
Well, it's quite, and Matt mentioned it's an immense show. There is a lot to do. There's a lot of big sets. I can't imagine how many trucks and things with all the set pieces and things like that there are. For your day, what does your average day look like? When do you get to the theater? What is your pre-show prep like, and what do you do during the show?
So for my position, it's 24/7. My phone is always on. I'm getting calls as we sit here and talk right now. I'm accessible to the producers because a lot of our team is in the UK and around the world. I'm available because our time differences are off, as well as cast needs, crew needs, musician needs, people being sick, people being on vacation, children in school, planning the show for the next couple of venues that we have coming up. We're booked for another 3 years. So we're already looking at venues further down the road, and advancing with those right now. So it never ends. Physically at the theater on a show night, if it's just one show, generally we arrive 2 hours before the performance to prep everything and get everything ready, do the 3-hour show, and then I'm usually there for an hour afterwards, doing a report and doing the payroll. And then I usually head home and have dinner around midnight. On a 2-show day, we're there all day for both shows, so that ends up being about a 14-hour day. And we work 6 days a week because the shows run Tuesday through Sunday. And then on Monday is our day off, and that's generally when the show travels to the next city. At a brand new city, when we're loading in on the first day, we begin loading in. We load out a show on a Sunday night in a city. It takes about 8 hours to load it all into 11 trucks. The trucks move to the next city, and we fly or bus there and are there to meet the trucks. And we start unloading everything and setting everything back up from scratch. And that takes about a day and a half. And then we add the cast in. We do a sort of orientation to the new space. We do a sound check in that theater. And then we begin performances on a Tuesday night, and we run straight through to Sunday. And it's just a rinse and repeat week after week, year after year. And we're grateful.
I imagine they try to keep the schedule sort of efficient, as far as where cities are on the map. What's been your most challenging trip between cities, and as far as quick turnaround and distance?
Oh, it's not so much on Les Miserables, but certainly on other shows I've done. Uh, the planning of the routes happen a year in advance, so they're already planning for the 2024-2025 season, so that they can, tie these shows together. So you're not doing, Boston to LA and then to Wisconsin. So they do try and get them in order. On a show that's not as popular, not a popular title, you don't get the first picks of the times. So you can find yourself chasing yourself across the country and then dealing with the worst would be like on daylight savings day, where the clocks are going to go ahead early and you're facing a time change. So you're already 2 hours lost right out of the box, that those hours are just never going to come back. So it doesn't happen so much on Les Miserables. There'll be like one or two exceptions where it's tight. But we've been doing it so long now that we can make up for it.
So you've worked in a variety of settings, all these logistics to think about: Broadway, national tours, international tours. We talked a little bit about traveling from city to city. Do you have a favorite city, or maybe a favorite venue that you've worked in that is kind of feels like home to you, or one that you really, really enjoy?
Well, I grew up in Boston, so seeing theater as a kid in those theaters, as like a 10-year-old boy, and then now coming back and playing those same theaters that shaped my life, I think will always be special. There are four major playhouses in Boston that I've had the privilege to play, and they're all shows that my mom took me to see shows in. So I think, yeah, the hometown advantage, absolutely. I love that there's so few theaters that I haven't played yet. It's exciting to play a brand new theater. There's a few brand new theaters that get built, and so you're one of the first time going through a new theater. That's always exciting to me, to see a brand new, sort of break the ice on a brand new theater. Yeah.
I assume that each theater kind of gets vetted to make sure that big set pieces are going to fit. You've got the height and width, but obviously every stage is just a little bit different. So when you go to a new town, or just even one that you're familiar with, what are the biggest headaches or just the biggest changes you need to make to a set usually to fit into a specific unique theater?
Sure. I'm going to go backwards in history a little bit here to explain this. So when I started touring used to be something that you did from Labor Day to Memorial Day. So you rehearsed in the summer, your show went out on Labor Day, you rehearsed you ran for 7 months, whatever, and then you closed by Labor Day, and then summer stock sort of took over, and then you get ready to do another show. So when I was touring with Goulet, we would do Camelot, and then we'd do the year, and then everyone would say goodbye, and then Robert decided we're going to do South Pacific. So then we go into rehearsal for South Pacific. So you toured around and then each year was a different thing. It was truly with like Cameron Mackintosh and these large scale shows, particularly Phantom of the Opera, that really changed the road. Cameron's feeling was, and is still to this day, that the audience in any city in the country should see the exact same show you would see in New York City. That there shouldn't be cut down versions. It should be the exact same show you would be seeing if you were in New York. And in order to do that, a lot of the cities that we play now in America needed to be retrofitted. If you wanted to get Phantom of the Opera, which was the big show at the time, you had to do a major renovation at your theater. in order to house Phantom. And so we can thank Cameron for all of these theaters across North America now being able to take a big show. The fly systems had to be changed. They used to be hemp houses. The dressing rooms were very small. The support areas were very small. The loading docks were just a regular, two-door load-in. In order to get Phantom of the Opera, a lot of these theaters held capital improvements and drives and subscriber, did major renovations. So it paved the way for every show after that. So now most every single theater in the country is a tourable venue that can sustain big shows like Wicked and Les Miserables and Miss Saigon and all the shows that have come after that. So for us, we have minimal technical. We have a tech rider that goes out, and so we have very specific. We can only play. You have to give us this much space. It has to be, or else we'd have to compromise our show. And Les Miserables is not a show that will get compromised. We would rather not play it than cut anything out of our show. We want the show to be representative of exactly what it was in New York. Traditionally, New York theaters are very small in general backstage just because of the real estate and what they are. The trouble becomes loading it in and loading it out. Now, here in Seattle, they have, because of the architecture of the alleyway and loading in, it's a difficult load in. It took us almost an extra full day to carefully load the show into the theater. We were here for a month-long engagement, so it was definitely worth the investment to do so. But we were very proud that we were able to fit the entire show into the Fifth Avenue here in Seattle. It was just a wonderful, but it took months of working and trying to figure it out. And we've got stuff in every little corner that we could possibly. We're flying things into the air to give us more storage space on the stage to keep it safe. We're doing 30-year history in 3 hours with many sets and costumes. And it does require just to have that much room. So there is a minimum tech requirement that we send out that if you want to buy our show or host our show in your city, you have to meet these minimum requirements. And each show could be different. Something small like Come From Away would not have such a longer and more restrictive things than a show like Les Miserables or the MJ musical, which will be touring next year. That'll be the other big show going out. Or Moulin Rouge, which is currently touring right now.
You have is there I don't want to necessarily call them a scout team or anything, but is there an advanced team that goes to the city that you're going to next? So while you're in Seattle, I'm not sure, I don't recall where you're going to after Seattle, but is there somebody that's going to go there the week
Salt Lake City will be our next city. No. There are some shows that I've done that for. So when I toured with Jersey Boys, we had an advanced team that would go ahead and they would send us all of their notes. The unique thing about Jersey Boys was that the set had to be partially out into the audience. The spiral staircase was floating out in the audience because the orchestra was not in the pit. In order to do that in any house in North America, you need to make sure that the fire curtain can safely come in at any time during a performance. So if you have your set out in the house, you're going to block the fire curtain coming in. So we had special things built onto the set that could break away, that was strong enough to structurally hold the set, but that they could break away in the event that a fire curtain needed to go in. So for that show, it was a specific site visit in every city to make sure that the show could make it in there. Additionally, on Jersey Boys, we had an advanced truss, so something that the whole show hung from. So we had a red one and a blue one, and one would go ahead to a city before us while we were using this one, and then they would just flip-flop. And that happens a lot on Hamilton now, where they have a jump set that will go ahead of it. For Les Miserables, we have been doing this now for 35 years. The show's been active and running. And because of the experience of our crew, we have a production department within our organization. I have records on my computer from every show that's ever played any theater. A lot of the older stage managers, we all share our notes. So I can pull up a record and see when somebody was in there 2 months ago, how they laid it out. And I'm able to look at, and I'll put my notes on so that the next show that comes into Seattle, the Fifth Avenue, can pull up my notes and see how we did it and help solve problems and how we assign spaces and things like that. So It does take a big community, but on Les Mis, it's been around and it's played most every venue. It's rare to find a venue we have not been in yet.
So over the past 35 years, you've seen a lot of changes, I'm sure. You talk about taking notes. One of the most fun parts about your website, jack-mcleod.com, again, if anybody wants to visit and avail themselves of the notes you've taken about all these shows, you just click on a poster and get some really cool, fun behind-the-scenes info. You've worked on all these big hits, just timeless stuff. Now, talking about Les Mis, have you seen any changes over the course of those 35 years? We talked about the changes that venues need to think about to bring in these big productions. But have you seen any changes to maybe the content or the way the shows are put on to evolve or match modern sensibilities at all? Or is Les Mis one of those shows that is just timeless and it's the same it's been for the last 3 decades?
Les Mis is the exception to the rule. It
Okay.
really is, and it's because the material is so rich and deep. For Les Mis, the tough thing for us is the details. You can never let the details blur. So we have a resident director that we travel with, Richard. We work together. He's keeping an eye on all of the acting. We have a dance captain that travels with us. He's keeping an eye on all the spacing. I'm keeping an eye on all the technical things with my team. I've got 11 cameras mounted all around the set that I'm able to actually zoom in, and I can see that the paint is starting to peel on a certain piece of scenery, or that a costume is looking, a little threadbare. And we're able to see all those details. We pay very, very good attention to the details physically in the production, which is what my responsibility is, as well as the acting, that the acting remains honest. And so we're all looking at it every night. And I think that's what makes this show just the beauty that it is. You can't let those details slip away, or it just doesn't work anymore. It looks like a tired old tour, and we never want to feel like that. On other shows I've been on, that's not been the case, and it does tend to become, just a show.
Yeah, and this production does look. I mean, it's huge. It feels like the roof is going to blow off the theater, and it's not just it is the acting, it's the singing, and it is the sets. It's the whole package that is just seems larger than life, and as just, and to your point about the details, there's not, you see some people are familiar with the Les Mis, film that came out a little while ago, and then you come to this, and it's just night and day how much more of a experience this is.
I mean, the other great thing with Les Miserables is our authors are still very much involved. I'm constantly communicating with them. They come and rehearse with us. So, Claude Michel and Alana are still very involved. It's their baby. They care. The people care so much about this show. And Cameron comes out. Cameron's with us on stage working. It's just, there's something, they're very protective about this show. And we all are. If you're, proud enough to be involved in it, you protect the girl, Cosette, she's a lot of work. She requires a lot of attention, but she's worth it. And we take that very, very seriously. And the fact that these amazing artists are still so committed to the show that they don't just take the check and stay home. There are shows I've done that I never see the authors. I never talk to the authors. They don't want to talk to me. Just send me my check. Les Miserables has always been an ever-changing, evolving love project. I mean, there's just it's a different show when you see it at different points in your life. So the show that I saw when I was a young man seeing this show, I related to one storyline. Now, as an older man, I relate to different storylines, different things, different experiences in our lives are going to couch how we see the show. And I always talk to the cast about tonight's show only lives tonight. We're never going to have this audience in this theater with this crew and this cast and these musicians ever again. It will only happen tonight. We capture that tonight because you don't know what every audience member's story is that came in tonight. And you have 2,000 to 4,000 people who all came in tonight after seeing the news on TV and in the world, after living their own experiences. And so it can change your perspective of if you're feeling down and not feeling that you're being heard or not feeling justified in the world, you may relate more to the Javert Valjean story. If you're in a new relationship or an unrequited love, you're going to head more towards the Eponine Marius Cosette story. Uh, the rebellion, I mean, the students' rebellion, it plays out almost daily on the news across the world that the Victor Hugo tapped into a universal story that is shockingly still relevant today. And that's part of the beauty. But tonight will only be tonight's show. And at the end of the show, we do it the best we can. We serve the material, we serve the audience, and it becomes a collective experience when we all stand at the end, and we're standing as well, cheering each other on. That we as a community, the audience and the show and the musicians and the actors and the music and the technical elements all came together in this one night we'll never have it again. We'll never have this happen again. It's unique tonight. And if you go into every performance feeling that it's a gift and there's a humble feeling about it, that tonight is special. And it's not like last night. It won't be like tomorrow night. That's what drives me to the show, the passion and the emotion of it. And with the younger people that are in our industry, I remind them of that shared experience, because I think it does make our show soar.
Have you ever been involved in a
beautiful
show?
sentiment?
Thanks,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a show that, because I don't imagine Les Miserables does, but that leverages local resources when you come to a city?
Oh, every show does. Every time we come in. Oh, sure. When we show up, we hire locally. So we travel only like 15 to 17 crew members, and then we triple that to run our show. So we're like the department heads, but then we bring in local people who are actually doing the scene changes with us, doing the costume changes, doing the wigs, setting the props. Yeah, it absolutely, to load in the show, there'll be 75 local Seattle crew members there to open our truck and load us in over the course of a day and a half. And then they go away, and we have between 30 and 50 people that are just here in Seattle. And what's amazing to me is, because I've been in the business so long, is that a lot of the crew members I'm working with now, I worked with their moms and dads earlier in my career. And so I come back in, and it's, still the same people. It's like coming home. When I usually arrive at a theater, there's lots of hugs and pictures and catching up with everybody with, how's everyone doing? I want you to meet, Junior. You remember he came in when, he was, this high, and you brought him onto the set of, Sound of Music. He ran up and down the staircases when he was a little lad. And now look at, he's a member of the union and going to run our show with us. So yeah, we do use a lot of resources, as well as the theater itself, which the theater has, ushers and box office and the economy that right around the theater, parking garages and hotels and restaurants. A Broadway show coming to your community, can bring in $1 million in revenue just within the little theater community itself, just in all the extra things that happen. So it's pretty viable for everyone.
Yeah, it takes a village. And, Greg and I have been involved in theater for several years now. It's how we met. And, it's fun to be on stage, but there are a lot of people who really just, they're not called on stage. They're not called to be on stage. They really blossom. They really come into their own behind the scenes. That's where they prefer to be. And, not everybody needs to be the star out there, center stage. If, say, for a young person who's listening to this interview, you spoke about that mindset going into each show as a fresh, new experience, really a wonderful way to think about things, really all across the arts. But what advice would you have for someone who's interested in doing the type of behind the scenes work that you're doing? Is there a kind of a traditional ladder to climb, or an internship? How did you get into it, and has that changed? What steps could they take?
Any and all of the above. It has not really changed from, when I started out. I was in high school, or even grade school, doing plays. I would do plays. I would act in them. I would design them. I would direct them. I would star in them. I would manage them. I did them in my backyard. I did it, all the way through. And then I had a pretty good career as an actor growing up. And then I got sort of tired of going into an audition and seeing five people who look just like me at every audition. And there's nothing that was the rejection can be horrible because it's out of your control. And it's just the will of the casting and the director or whatever that they chose this person instead of that person. So I thought perhaps I could go to the technical side, and I happened to call a theater. I would have done anything. I just wanted to be involved. And I called a theater, and the person that answered the phone was a production stage manager. And I talked to the production stage manager, and they invited me up to the theater, and I became their assistant. If the lighting person had answered the phone that day, I probably would have been a lighting person. Same thing with the sound. It just so happened that this wonderful person sensed my passion and was able to point me in a direction and was so giving of letting me be involved in the process and learning how to run a rehearsal and treat actors and treat designers and artistics and take blocking and write a call book. And I never would have, it could have been anything. I could have, but I knew that acting was just not going to make it for me the rest of my life. It's just a very hard living. As a stage manager, most of my work is based on my skill and my temperament and my reputation in the business. That's how I get hired and rehired. I don't audition for jobs, and I hire a team that comes with me. So, and I'm the guy that hires the young team. I don't have like my usual team that I bring to every show. So for Les Miserables, I have two brand new stage managers who I'd never worked with that were recommended and we vetted, and they are one of my strongest stage management teams ever. I mean, these stage managers I'm working alongside of, and I love that. I love sort of bringing up the younger core. So going back to your question, theater doesn't have to be on Broadway or on tour. Theater is in your own community. Theater's in your school. There are so many opportunities with community theaters, college theaters. If you just raise your hand and say, I want to be involved, theater is one of the most, open and inviting. They'll find something for you.
Yeah, everybody loves a volunteer.
Absolutely. And that's the way you get in. You start making those connections and meeting people. But doing theater, it's no different. What I'm doing every night in Seattle is absolutely no different than what I did in my junior high and high school. The stakes emotionally are the same. I'm telling a story. I'm telling a story to someone who's on the other side listening. Sure, it gets more complicated with the lighting and the automation of the fog and the size. The responsibility is bigger, and this is a multi-million-dollar production that I'm personally responsible for every night that they've entrusted me to do. It's an awesome responsibility, but it's something that I take very, I know I can do it. I know I have every confidence in myself, and I know I can make this happen every night for them, 8 times a week on time, and straight through. And that's what I'm known for. So I would recommend, if you want to get into theater, you don't have to be an actor. It's great for technicians to start out as actors because then you get sort of a better feeling. It's great for actors to occasionally spend some time, on the tech side as well. So you have a better appreciation. But it truly, I can't play a musical instrument, but I am awestruck every night listening to our orchestra live at the theater. It's a skill I don't possess, but I respect it like no other. Hearing the string section play after the barricades have fallen, they have this wonderful moment in the show that it's just hearing that collection of musicians make that beautiful moment when the barricades split and go apart. Every night it's beautiful to hear. So musicians, there's room for everyone. Company management, stage management, props, lighting, sound, costumes, wigs, makeup, and there's so many opportunities. There are internships. Every theater has an internship. There are opportunities that if a stage manager writes to me, here's my assistant right now that I have wrote to me years ago to come and sit and just, he was in school, wanted to come and sit with me and watch me do my job, wanted to come shadow me. I allowed him to come do this. He wrote me a beautiful letter. He came, he put on a headset, he sat next to me and watched what I do for a living. Fast forward, a number of years now, he's graduated out of college and he's now my assistant. And he's not the first, it's the third person who connected with me while I was touring across the country in a different city that reached out to me, were very easy to find, and said, I think I want to do what you do. How do I do this? And I said, well, come sit with me, spend 3 hours, 4 hours with me, see what it is we do. And, if this is really what you want to do, you'll know. And so I'm all about being as open and as, I go talk to colleges and students and high schools and, when I'm touring across the country. A lot of it got reduced during COVID, where we weren't allowed to go do things like that. But for 30 years, I've been a huge advocate of, like, whenever you call and need me to come and talk about what I do for a living and how you could do this for a living, I'm right there. I think it's important for us to sort of pay it forward, because I would have loved that if someone did that for me, but I was sort of too shy to even think I could even ask to come backstage at a Broadway theater. So I encourage them to reach out. If a show's coming through your town, now that COVID restrictions have lifted, absolutely get in touch with the production stage manager. If it's possible for you to come and sit backstage and shadow a show, or a lighting person or a sound person, you can write to them and we'll do the very best we can to accommodate you, because we were all there. Some shows don't allow it for safety or insurance reasons, but it never hurts to ask. And if we can't bring you in there, we are more than happy to meet you for coffee in the lobby, to have a one-on-one and chat with you about what we do. We will do anything we can. And I think I speak for almost every technician that I know and work with, to open this world up. There's only so much you can learn from a book in college, and but theater travels through every single state in this country, and we're all there, and we're all very, very willing. I don't speak just for myself. I think you would find that across the board.
There's just another way. Matt and I talk about this all the time, how inclusive theater is. We touched on that a little bit earlier too. It's a band of misfits. That's the only place that a lot of us feel like we can go. And that's just another example of it. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Now, you've obviously got still this passion after so many years of doing this, and the amount of shows you've done. When you go down through your resume, Kinky Boots, Jersey Boys, Avenue Q. One that's jumped out at me when I was going through that is what you list as the quote unquote infamous Broadway tryout of Lone Star Love with Randy Quaid.
Sure.
Is there a backstory there as far as the infamous Broadway tryout as opposed to just the Broadway tryout? It sounds like there's got to be a story there.
And from Seattle too, I think, right?
It happened here in Seattle.
Yeah.
I was on the road with Cirque du Soleil. I was doing a tour of Delirium. We were just finishing the North American tour, and I got invited to be part of the Broadway team for Lone Star Love. It was a pre-Broadway tryout that was going to happen. We'd rehearse in New York. We'd come to Seattle to the Fifth Avenue Theater and do our tryout, and then we would open the following month in December on Broadway at the Glasgow Theater. And it was in a particularly quiet season where there weren't a lot of new shows coming in. And this was financed by Texas money. So it wasn't money coming in from the usual sources. So it really was a unique sort of opportunity. It ran off Broadway quite successfully years and years ago. And now they were making the Broadway version. It was written by the Red Clay Ramblers. So they were like a bluegrass group who wrote the music. The man who wrote the book is Robert Horn, who was nominated for Shucked at the Tonys this year, and he wrote the books for Tootsie, I believe, is also as well. So Robert wrote the books, and we showed up to rehearsal, and Randy Quaid was going to star. Now the other people in the cast were, Bob Cuccioli, Dee Hoade, Lauren Kennedy, Clark Thorell, Kara Lindsay, all major people. We were sort of late to even rehearsing it. We took sort of the last rehearsal room, which was in the old Hilton Theater, kind of little rehearsal space, and we started rehearsing. and everything was going along just fine. Randy showed up. Now, Randy is a huge, big man, and he was very quiet, but everyone is always, when the movie star shows up, you just, you don't want to be weird. So you just sort of like, hey, it's cool. And he had his wife with him, Evie. And they were just lovely. They were just really lovely. And it was very exciting. This was going to be Randy's Broadway debut. Rehearsals were going along just fine. We went to do our press show, which is when we meet the press for the first time. And for some odd reason, that morning, Randy showed up to rehearsal, and his hair was completely dyed like bright purple, which he'd never done before. And he wore like really dark sunglasses. And that's how he presented himself in front of the press that day for our, here's our first look into Lone Star Love. I don't believe he talked to anybody about it. I think it was just he felt that character was going to be that character. And it worked for him. Randy's a peculiar talent, and it absolutely works. So we flew to Seattle. I remember walking into the Fifth Avenue Theater and seeing the set and saying, "Oh my gosh, it's actually going to happen." We did our technical rehearsals. We did our first performance. The audiences liked it. It wasn't horrible. It definitely, you're out of town, so you're trying out, you're changing new material, you're writing new scripts, you're changing lines, you're tightening it. After the first preview, we all head off to our corners and everyone makes notes of what we're going to change. We get everything ready for the next day of rehearsal, and I'm in charge of the script changes, so I have all the script changes. And we all meet in the theater for the morning after the first preview. And I've got all the script changes ready to hand out, and we're waiting. There's no Randy, there's no director, there's no authors. We're just all waiting. No one knows what's going on. A couple hours later, we released the company because there's obviously we're not going to rehearse. Randy said no changes were going in. We're going to do the show exactly as we did it last night, which was weird. Generally, I've worked with a couple of stars that have had strong opinions, but they just sort of let it go. We did the show that night the same way. Came in and did the next preview. Had the next morning, we all got in the theater ready for the script changes. Again, no Randy, no changes going in. And this happened like 3 days in a row. So there was a bigger problem. What we were learning was that Randy had somehow in his contract complete artistic control over everything, which is unheard of, which none of us believed. Of course, we were like, this is just weird. Apparently he did. He really did. And so no changes could go into the show without him authorizing them or agreeing to them. He had his own ideas of where he wanted the show to go. The artistics didn't agree with his way. There was no compromise. And then he ultimately left the show. And the understudy had to go on and finish the run, and they canceled the whole thing. We were going to be opening on Broadway. They put our marquee up, and then the next day they took it down. And the show opened and closed here in Seattle. And it was just an absolutely a challenge between they just couldn't see eye to eye on the show. And we were all sort of caught in the middle. Now, there was a lot of other things that happened while we were there in the course of the control of the show, sort of deciding where it was going to end up being. And there were some behavior issues that occurred. So following the closing of the show, there was a very serious meeting that took place that we all had to be witnesses to. And at the end of the meeting, Randy ended up being barred from Actors Equity for his lifetime, and ended up with a huge fine. There's you can Google it, or it'll be a chapter in my book, but it's not getting into it here. But it was yes. So it's the show that shall not be named here. So when I come back to the Fifth Avenue, it's definitely the show that shall not be named. But yeah.
Wow.
I had a similar case with Lauren Bacall, where we had done the first preview of Waiting in the Wings in Boston. We all came in and rehearsed all afternoon while she was in her dressing room interviewing her like fifth or sixth hairdresser. Then she finally came out of the dressing room to join us on stage. and she absolutely refused to do any of the changes we had just rehearsed. And it went back and forth and back and forth, and then it got into a screaming match, and everyone got sent home for the day. So it happens, and I'm always sort of right there in the middle,
Of
sort of
course.
Wow.
watching like a tennis ball. Yeah.
Well, you've got to have tons of stories like that. And there's a couple excerpts on your website of your forthcoming book. Do you have a date on that? When folks will be able to read all of your, I mean, you're a busy guy. So just
Yeah, well, I
still
just finished
compiling all these crazy
it's
stories.
still happening. I'm still
Yeah.
living my life, but no, I've been very good at documenting it. I just finished
Right.
the tour of before Les Mis, in between Les Mis closing for the pandemic and Les Mis reopening. I did the tour of Pretty Woman for about 6 or 7 or 8 months, and it wasn't a good experience. So that's in the book as well. There are some shows that are great, and Les Mis is the pinnacle. It's probably one of the top two things I've ever done, and I'm still proud of it every night.
Do you
Well,
have is there any bucket list show that you have yet to, like, again, you've done them all?
Les Miserables was the, yeah, Les Miserables was the, I've never felt more satisfied nightly. From the first day I came in to do the show, now I'm joining it after it's already been on Broadway, it's already done the tour. I was the new guy coming in. These people have done this forever. These authors, these designers. It never felt like it was a revival of the show. It felt like our show, this group, this cast, these managers. We were never told, well, you're supposed to do it this way, or last time we did this. They don't use those words. They let you find it, and they're so supportive and so encouraging. And once they welcome you into the team, it is like the biggest hug welcome with these world class, artists that it's undeniable to feel that much acceptance and not just the new guy that's here. They welcomed me in and gave me a place at the table. And that when that happens, it's rare in this business. I find I've done a lot of revivals, and it's sort of okay. And then Robert walks over here, and then we do this costume change here. You do it, or they look at the Broadway show and they carbon copy it. When I did the tour of Kinky Boots, we were the first national, and they were restaging the Broadway show. It didn't matter that there were new people in the room. We were doing it as if it was done on Broadway, and there was very little input on our end because this is how we did it on Broadway. And that doesn't make you feel much ownership when you're being shown an iPad of a scene and saying, see how she picks up the coffee cup with this hand? That's what we need you to do. And seeing an actor say, well, can I hold it in the other hand? No, I really, and that's hard to watch, somebody try and own a role or own their responsibility in a show when you're basically just hired to be a carbon copy. It doesn't fulfill your desire and need to be in the show. I'm calling all the same cues that every stage manager before me is called. I'm doing the same paperwork. I'm doing, but I own it. I feel that there was nobody before me, and there'll be somebody after me. So that there is a sense of ownership and pride, that this is my responsibility. So yeah, Les Mis is unique. It's been the most unique show I've ever done. Like that, it's a labor of love. It really is, and that's absolute truth.
And it shows.
Everyone
And
should. Yeah,
it's such a good show, and it's on stage at the Fifth Avenue here in Seattle through this weekend. So
Saturday night.
if you out there have not seen it yet, do your best, to get out there and see it, because you will not be disappointed. And Jack McLeod, thank you so much for your time today.
We're going to be back in Spokane. I think we come back this way again. So I don't know how far away Spokane. It's not like 2.5 hours, but I think we're going to be coming back again. I mean, we're on tour for another 3 years. So if you didn't catch us this time, do find a way to see the show. It is pretty spectacular, and we loved doing it for you. So I do hope you come.
Well, thank you again for your time, Jack. It was a pleasure
Absolutely.
meeting you. And
Greg,
when the book, you let us know when the book comes out, we'll have you back on.
I'd
And
love that.
next time you come through town, we'll get together and hear about your latest adventures. Until then, jack-mcleod.com. We'll have it posted in the links. People can check out your career and all your stories from the road and from all these wonderful shows that we've so enjoyed. And we've enjoyed our time together with you. So thank you again, Jack.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.